Hey, what's going on, everybody? Brad Miller here. Just wanted to make another video. So I put out my first video yesterday. Just kind of an intro video to me, who I am, how I got to be where I am now, and kind of what I plan to do next. So this one, I wanted to actually touch on a specific topic. Yesterday, I was just kind of, all over the place because I just wanted to give people just a very quick sketch of who I am, for people who might come across the video and might not have heard anything about me. And also just wanted to let people know, hey, I've opened up a couple of channels, more videos are going to come. So today I wanted to talk about something, an actual topic, a little bit more specifically, and that's about the military. And for those of you who don't really care about the military, all good. I plan to talk about many more things than just the military, because I even my own perspective, I would hope, is broader than just the fact that I served as a military officer. I certainly have a lot of things that I care about beyond just military service. However, I also acknowledge that that's how my name got out there. That's a large reason why anybody who might care who I am, one of the primary reasons why they might care is because of, my military service, and what that has meant. And that's okay. I fully accept that. So in talking about that today, there are a couple of questions that I want to answer. Some of these questions I've touched on before. So today I'll touch on them a little bit more, maybe give a little bit more depth in my responses. So I routinely get questions such as, would you recommend military service right now for someone who is considering joining the armed forces? Another related question is, if you had it to do all over again, would you make the same decision that you did with your own, resignation from the military? And I see those two questions as being related. Another question might be, how do you feel with everything that's happened with your own resignation? How do you feel about your military service as a whole? And how do you feel about the military as a whole? So let me answer all of those, right? How do I feel? Let me answer the easy one. How do I feel about my military service? Extremely positive. And what I mean by that is, that's the short answer. I'm very proud to be a veteran of the armed forces. I'm very proud to have served as an Army officer, for 19 years. And I'm very proud to be a West Point graduate. So when I speak of these institutions, I am proud to have been a member of those institutions for a very long period of time. Now, you can see the walls behind me. I mean, I don't have a bunch of like Army memorabilia in my study. I don't have any, really. You'll find a bunch of books and stuff, like military history books or books on strategy, etc. But you're not going to find plaques on my wall. I don't have a single plaque in here, that is something that I earned during the military. I don't have anything against those, and maybe even at some point I would even put those up. But I just haven't, but I wouldn't have anything against displaying those necessarily. I do not have my, I don't guess I have anything from West Point that I have displayed anywhere in my house either. I have all that stuff. But I don't have anything displayed, right? But the fact that I don't have any of that displayed just says more about me as a person and what I choose to display or not display in my house than it does about my feelings towards the armed services. Wherever I've lived over the last 20 years, since 2003, when I got out of West Point, I've never displayed any of that stuff. Again, not because it's not important to me, but I've never been a person to put a lot of stuff up in my house anyway. So don't overthink what I'm saying when I say, like, hey, if you look here in my study, you look at the walls and you don't see a bunch of Army memorabilia displayed, don't assume that that's because I have a lot of heartburn with the Army. I have a lot of heartburn with the current leaders of the Army who have infiltrated an otherwise honorable institution and have completely corrupted it and have inverted it. When I say invert, I mean that very deliberately. You take something that is noble, you take something that is honorable, and in some senses, in some institutions, aligned with God, and then you flip that upside down. That's what I mean when I say invert. Like I use that very, very deliberately, and I attach like an evil connotation to it. And I think that's happened with DoD. So and I don't always make this distinction. I don't always make this distinction when I talk about the military. I don't always say, sometimes I do, but sometimes I don't. So you have institutions, and then you have the people who make up those institutions. And we should be clear about drawing that line of distinction between the two. We don't always do that when we're talking, and I'm guilty as well. So let me just be very clear right now. My heartburn is not with the Army. It's not even with Department of Defense. A lot of times I kind of say it that way. But what I really mean, and I think people kind of understand this, is the people who lead those organizations right now, who I think are criminals. I think some of them are guilty of treason. I think some of them are extremely depraved individuals. And I've said this many times. I think DoD is run by a bunch of criminals, some of whom are guilty of treason. I don't know who those individuals are. I'm not here to say, who's doing what. I mean, I can speculate, but I'm just telling you, I believe DoD, is run by people who are, guilty of treason. Sorry. And that treason is further enabled by a lot of cowardice at every level of command and leadership, from the generals and the admirals on down the line, in every single branch of armed service. So that's kind of how I feel about the military. But because I don't have any heartburn about the institution per se, and I mean, and what it's done over the last like 2.5 centuries, right? I'm still a proud veteran, and I don't know that that's necessarily going to change. Do I regret going to West Point? Do I regret being in the military for 19 years? No. If I had it to do all over again, would I resign? Yes. I think I said this yesterday in the video that I made. I have micro regrets. There are like conversations that I wish I had had with my superior, or maybe things I wish I had said a little bit more boldly while I was still kind of on my way out the door. But do I regret, like not going along with the mandate and allowing myself to be relieved of command? No, I don't regret that. Do I regret several months later resigning altogether from the service? No, I don't regret that either. I would do that all over again if I were in the same position again, right? However, I also don't regret going to West Point, years and years and years ago, when I first showed up as a cadet. I don't regret spending 19 years in the Army. Now, having said that, for those of you who might be a little bit familiar with my story, I do have to give one caveat. When I say I don't regret staying in the military for 19 years, there is a caveat there. I almost got out of the military between about 2019 to 2010-ish. I'm sorry, 2009 to 2010. I was very strongly considering getting out of the Army. So I was a captain at the time. By 2009, I would have had about 6 years of service. And I was very strongly considering getting out. Why? For those who've read on my Substack, so I have a Substack that's entitled, and again, if you want to go to my Substack, just go to my name, bradmiller10.substack.com. But I have a piece on there called, I think it's called COVID. No, hold on. 9/11, COVID, and me. So anyway, but what I will say, so go read that piece. But what I will say here is, that event, the big nine, right? I kind of woke up to the truth about that 2007, 2008-ish, etc. And by 2008 into 2009, I was finishing my contract with the Army. So, coming out of West Point, I had a 5-year contract that would have ended in 2008. There's a course that I did from the fall of 2007 into early 2008 that by doing that course, I incurred another year. So I really could have gotten out of the Army in 2009, and I considered it, largely because I was starting to catch on to the fact that, what the government tells us is it's just not true. Just not true. But I stayed in, right? And a large factor in my decision to resign in 2022 was influenced heavily by the fact that I did not, a decade or a decade plus earlier when I considered it. So was it me reversing a decision that I made a decade earlier? I don't know. Maybe that's a little bit strong. I don't know. But it definitely weighed heavily on my mind that I knew the government was engaged in actions against its citizens long before COVID, a decade before COVID. And I still stayed in the military. So a decade later, a decade older, when I see all this happening to an even greater degree, I just had to walk away. I just couldn't be a part of it. So, and I know people are going to watch this video and people are coming with different amounts of knowledge. I'm just telling you my journey. And but I mean, come on. I mean, if you still believe the official narrative about the Big Nine event, in all honesty, just go sit in the corner with a dunce hat on your head. I mean, I'm sorry, just do it. Anyway, I mean, if you're still wearing a mask right now, I mean, just go sit in the corner with a dunce hat on your head. I can't help you. So again, just to kind of recap what I just said. So do I feel guilty about my military service? No, not exactly. I could have gotten out in 2009, 2010. Would that have been the right answer? I don't know. Maybe. But it was the fact that I did not, and I considered it and had not, was a contributing factor to me getting out in 2022. That I can say that is true. Was it an act of, almost like, I don't know, atonement with myself? I don't know, maybe, maybe. So let's see, what else? How would I go back in if I were to be offered the chance to go back into the military right now? Would I go? I get asked this question. I might have even touched on this yesterday, but I'll talk more about it. I don't think so. Probably not. I mean, it's hard for me to even think in my head like a set of conditions under which I would go, or I can think of a set of conditions under which I would return to military service. What I can't do is think of a set of conditions that are actually feasible, that would lead me to go back in. That I just can't really think of, So if we were to get rid of the leadership, again, many of whom I think need to be prosecuted, if we were to get rid of the leadership and bring good people in, put them in charge of each service branch and the Department of Defense itself, I don't know where you'd find those people, but let's assume that you did that and that we got our priorities straightened out. Would I go back in? Well, even then, I mean, my next question would be, but you still have like an entirely thoroughly corrupt government that the Department of Defense, still answers to. So it's not, I mean, the Department of Defense is hugely problematic, but I mean, so is the rest of the government. I mean, how does that even fix itself? Yeah, people kind of joke sometimes. They're like, "Oh, what if you were, Secretary of Defense?" And that's a fun joke. I mean, it's never going to happen. I don't want to be. I mean, I'm not lobbying for Secretary of Defense. I mean, to me, the idea sounds ludicrous. I mean, I was just a lieutenant colonel. I mean, and I was only a lieutenant colonel for, let's see, by the time I got out of the Army, I guess I was a lieutenant colonel for 2.5 years. No, I mean, you don't. That doesn't mean anything when it comes to being the Secretary of Defense. But yeah, I mean, I'm not. I was not a senior officer, and I don't pretend to have more knowledge about the Department of Defense than I had. I was in for 19 years. That's true. But I mean, I wasn't in for 39. I mean, there are plenty of GOs that serve, and by GOs, I mean general officers that serve close to 40 years, or at least, 35 to 40 years. Those that achieve like a 4-star rank. I mean, they have a lot more knowledge than I do, and many of them have done rotations in the Pentagon. I never worked in the Pentagon. So I mean, there are a lot of ins and outs of Department of Defense that I am not intimately familiar with. But that doesn't mean that I don't understand the Army. Of course, I understand the Army. I was in it for 19 years, but I'm not going to pretend to understand the Byzantine intricacies of what goes on in the Pentagon. I'm not going to pretend to understand all that. Yeah, and I don't really want to, and I can't imagine. I mean, I understand administrative red tape, and I understand bureaucracies that are inherent to large organizations. I got it. But I also know that, the Pentagon is just corrupt to its core. I mean, look what comes out of it. It's just completely corrupt. And I'm not just talking about just the natural friction and inefficiencies that exist in large organizations. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about just look at what comes out of the Pentagon. I mean, it's a corrupt organization. It's a corrupt organization that recently has been targeting its own citizens. I mean, there's just no other way around it. We have to be honest. Are we going to continue to be asleep, or are we going to be honest about what's happening? Well, let's be honest. So do I have any desire to go back and put the uniform back on? No. And it's not because I'm not a proud American. In fact, it's because I'm a proud American that I don't want to work for an institution that, I mean, is, when we look at what's been going on the last couple of years, one of the main implements of American enslavement, So do I think that DOD, under its current leadership, is working against the freedom of Americans? Yes, I do. I understand how paradoxical that sounds. I understand that it sounds paradoxical for someone to say, I had to, in order to maintain my oath to the Constitution, I had to leave the military, an organization that purports to, support and defend the Constitution. I understand how paradoxical that sounds. I got it. I understand. It is paradoxical, but that's the reality of the situation that I found myself in, and I'm not the only one. And there are plenty of people who are still in the military right now that are disgusted with the senior leadership. And, I've said this many times. In my mind, we have an ineffective fighting force, because the massive moral injury that is pervasive across the entire force represents a strategic threat, because you have so many people that cannot trust their unit leaders because they saw what their local unit leaders did with the unlawful COVID-19 vaccine mandate. Yes, it was unlawful. They saw leaders push this. They saw leaders destroy the careers of otherwise, good service members. And they saw what happened at the top. So people are disgusted with their local unit leaders. They're disgusted with the senior Pentagon leadership. And but they're still in the service, And I mean, how do you have an effective fighting force once that trust has been eroded? And how are you going to rebuild that trust? Like that is not going to happen overnight. Not going to happen. So that leads me to perhaps the most important question. Would I recommend military service right now to someone who is considering it? No, but let me give a caveat. Again, it's not because I have anything against the military. It's because I can't in good conscience recommend anyone to put themselves under the command of people who cannot be trusted. Whether we're talking about at the very top, where some of these individuals, I mean, you know, they're criminals. I believe they're criminals. You know, I mean, I'm not the one who's going to determine that in the legal system, but I mean, I believe there's plenty of, you know, evidence that, you know, crimes have been committed. That's what I believe. I mean, you know, I think people should be prosecuted. Let the evidence result in, you know, whatever findings come about. But I mean, that's what I believe, right? Assuming that the legal system would even operate with the aim of serving justice, which I don't necessarily believe that that's what would actually happen, but whatever. But yeah, I cannot in good conscience recommend that people put themselves under the leadership of people who do not have the Constitution first and foremost in their mind. I don't think they have the defense of the nation as a top priority. I don't think that military readiness that would enable the defense of the nation, I don't believe that that's a top priority. So how could I recommend that someone, you know, join the military? I can't. Now, there are people who will say to me, yeah, but hold on, like my family has joined the military for generations and generations. You know, my dad served, my grandfather served, my great grandfather served. A lot of people, you know, the military has been, the military has seen generational service for a long time. So let's say someone comes to me and says exactly that. Hey, my dad served, my grandfather served, my great grandfather served. A lot of people, you know, that's how they feel about military service. And now it's my turn, and I really want to serve. I've always wanted to serve since I was a little kid. In that, I mean, that's tricky. Like, that's tricky. And so, you know, I would say to that individual, well, if you're looking to serve your nation, there are other ways in which you can serve your nation. There are arguably much better ways right now in which you can serve your nation. And this coming from somebody who put on the uniform, you know, for 19 years. And felt like, in my case, I felt like I was serving my nation by taking the uniform off more than I could serve the nation if I were to continue to wear my uniform and go along with the destruction of the military and the you know, the disloyalty to the Constitution, etc. So I would probably talk to this individual and say, hey, if you want to serve your nation, first of all, completely noble sentiment. Let's talk about other ways in which you might be able to do that are actually better. But there are going to be people, and I also understand this argument too. There are people who are like, especially young men, and you know, I used to be one. I'm still kind of a young man, right? Hey, I want to test myself, or I want to, you know, a lot of young men still see the military as a rite of passage. I mean, I get it. You know, I get it. You know, I understand. They want to prove themselves. They want to demonstrate their, again, they see it as like, you know, coming of age or a rite of passage. None of which I necessarily see as bad, by the way. I mean, I think, I'm not going to get into this, but I mean, I do think masculinity should be celebrated. This is a completely different topic for a different day, but I think that's also a noble endeavor. You know, I think, and again, I'm talking specifically about men. There are plenty of women who want to serve in the military too, but with this specific idea with men who, you know, want to test themselves, etc. And they see the military as a way to do that. You know, I mean, I'm sensitive to that. Like, I understand that. You know, I get it. That's part of the reason why I joined the military too. I'm not saying women can't have that idea too, but I just think that there is something innate to a lot of young men that look for ways in which to, if for no other reason, almost like prove to themselves that they are a man. And no, I don't think that's a bad thing. And but I'm just not going to go there. Again, I think there are healthy ways to do that. And I think in a functioning society with a functioning military, the military would be a great way to do that. That's just not where we are, that's just not where we are. So maybe there are other ways in which a young man can find a way to challenge himself without having to go into the military. Somebody might say, hey, the military will allow me to go to college, or will allow me to do this, or will allow me to do that, or whatever. And we can talk about all of those. Okay, well, do you really need to go to college right now? I mean, that's a completely different topic too. But, what it really boils down to is I would have conversations with these individuals and try to get at the root cause as to why they want to join the military. And maybe we could come up with other avenues that they could go down to help them reach their goals or meet whatever intent they have without having to resort to the military. Because once you sign that contract, you're going to have to fulfill that contract. And I'm just going to reiterate, I can't in good conscience recommend that someone put themselves under the leadership of the military by signing a contract that you're just not easily going to be able to get out of, So for me, I was able to resign because I was no longer under a contract that I couldn't get out of. I was able to walk away. Now I lost my retirement by doing so, but my point is that I was no longer under some sort of contract that I could not get out of, though technically I had incurred extra time from the Army because I went through a course called the Advanced Military Studies program. And by finishing that program, I should have actually incurred 2 extra years in the Army. And I had only served 1 at the time that I tried to resign. And so I had to explain to them, like, listen, you want me out, I want out. You're gonna have to let me go, and they did. But I was not under some sort of more restrictive contract than that, like an initial enlistment contract or something that might be very hard to get out of. And but let's just say that I have these conversations with this individual, and the individual says, I understand everything you're saying, I'm still going to join. Then I would say, okay, I understand, I get it, I do. And I would wish that person all the luck in the world. I'd wish them my best, and I would be sincere. I'm not saying like, oh, well, you're not taking my recommendation, so therefore I'm going to just wash my hands of you. No, I wouldn't do that. I'd be like, okay, I understand. Maybe it's not the decision that I agree with, but I get it. I get it. And I kind of run into this even now with individuals that I knew, maybe individuals who worked for me or peers of mine. And I might see something that they post, maybe on social media, they post how they've just gotten promoted. And maybe I feel a little bit conflicted about it, because on the one hand, it's like, hey, that's great. Like, I'm very happy you got promoted. But on the other hand, it's like, but not necessarily why are you still in, but why did you go along with what just happened? So my peers who were battalion commanders with me, right? So in the brigade that I was in, there were 7 battalions in the brigade. And the other 6 battalion commanders were like just great dudes, just fantastic dudes. I didn't know any of them before we all took command. Well, I mean, I met them all kind of in the year leading up to command, but prior to us being selected to command battalions in the same brigade, I didn't know any of them. But we all had to go to the pre-command course. And so I ended up meeting all of them before we ended up taking command, but I had not known any of them previously, but they were all really good dudes, just fantastic dudes. I mean, some of those guys might make colonel. I don't know, or I don't know, but I've got other peers that also commanded battalions. I've got peers that have already been promoted to colonel. And on the one hand, I mean, I'm very proud of them. Some of them are, fantastic people. But on the other hand, I'm like, and I don't necessarily say this to them, though I would, but most of them, we just don't talk a lot now, if I'm being honest. But there's part of me at the time that I also feel happy for their accomplishments, and I mean, I'm sincere when I say like I'm happy for what they've accomplished, but there's a part of me that says you are part of the reason that the military is collapsing, and you're part of the reason that America is in trouble right now. And I mean that. And if I had a chance to speak to some of these individuals, I mean, I would tell them that in as like direct, but non like while being direct without trying to be overly aggressive, I guess is what I'm trying to say. But I have not had a lot of opportunities to necessarily do that. So, yeah. So I feel conflicted when I see my peers as they continue on in their career paths. And again, on the one hand, I'm very happy for them. Some of them I think will do incredibly well in the military, right? But on the other hand, I'm like, hey, the fact that I'm troubled by the fact that you have gone along with this and you're seemingly okay with it. Because if you're conflicted on the inside, you're not speaking up about it. And if you're not speaking up about it, then it doesn't matter that you're conflicted on the inside. You went along as the military very clearly conducted a purge and very clearly perpetrated an unlawful mandate on everyone. And even if you didn't know that 2 years ago when the mandate first came out, so much information has come out now that, I mean, it's so clear that it was unlawful. So, yeah, I'm just, just reiterating that I do feel a little bit conflicted with some of these individuals that are my friends. And I'm being serious when I say that they're my friends. A lot of them, very good buddies of mine. But I mean, I haven't forgotten what's gone on. And it's not because I'm personally vindictive. It's because I see our nation as truly being on the precipice. And I don't know how to be any clearer than that. And for those who feel differently, okay, cool, great. That's your opinion. That's your prerogative. Maybe I'm wrong, but maybe you're wrong. Maybe you don't see it. And maybe you have an incomplete view of exactly what is happening. Now, I'm not saying the United States is going to collapse. I am saying, though, that if things do not turn around, then it will continue on the path to ruin. And the military is not going to help it turn around. And in fact, is a major contributing factor in ensuring that it continues on that path toward ruin. The military will not fix itself. Now, I have plenty of friends that are good people. They fought the mandate. Maybe they didn't even take the shots, and they stayed in because they either stalled, they put in for religious objection, and they made it to the point where the National Defense Authorization Act from this past January, so January 2023, that as one of its stipulations brought about the repeal of the mandate. They made it to that point. The mandate was, supposedly repealed, and they're still in. Their careers are marked. Their files are marked. I don't know what their career trajectory will look like from here, but they're still in. And that is not the path that I chose to take. I don't condemn them for the decision that they made. And to some degree, I'm glad that they're still in. I think I can do much more outside of uniform than they can in uniform. I do think that. I do not wish that I were in uniform right now fighting from the inside. No, I don't. I think I can do much more out of uniform than I could in uniform. And I just don't trust the military at all right now. So, but I'm glad those people are there. They chose to be there. They're where they want to be. I'm glad that they're there. But that is not the path that I took. But that's okay. Everyone has sometimes, those individuals and me, we may have the same goals in mind for the military and for the country. And we just have, different views as to how we get there. And that's okay too. That's okay. So I think I don't even know how long I've talked for, but I've talked longer than I thought I was going to talk today. But I hope I gave just some background on my thoughts as to what I think about the military. I think it's unhealthy. I think it's an unhealthy organization right now. Now, somebody might come back and say, hey, my son or daughter is in the military right now and loves it. Great. I got it. I still think it's an unhealthy organization, writ large. That doesn't mean that your son or daughter's particular unit is unhealthy. But I will tell you, I hear a lot of cases of people who are like, I've been in for 15 years. This is not the organization that I joined 15 years ago. I can't wait to get out. Or I've been in for, 12 years. I've been in for 10 years, just whatever, right? Or I've been in for 4 years. I came in maybe, right before COVID. I really liked it. I thought this is what I wanted to do for 20 years. Now I just can't wait for my enlistment to end so I can get out. With anything, I always reserve the right to change my mind. I do consider myself to be open-minded. If things get better, and I'm optimistic. So, and I've said this before, but let me just say this now. So whether it's about the state of the country or whether it's about the state of the military, I am optimistic. But to me, when you say you're optimistic, there's an underlying assumption there that you have a realistic appraisal of the problem. Otherwise, it's not optimism, it's just naivete. So what I'm saying is, I think things are very bad. But I am hopeful that they will get better. I don't know when they'll get better. They may get worse before they get better. Things have to happen, like significant changes have to occur for things to get better. But I am optimistic that that can happen. I'm not all doom and gloom. So if it sounds like I'm doom and gloom, it's not that I'm doom and gloom. It's that I'm being realistic, and I will fight for the military. I will, because I care about the organization. But I'm going to fight from the outside. I mean, not from the inside. I just I don't think it would be effective. And I don't. There's not a single. So I was a lieutenant colonel, right? And I mean that when I say I was a lieutenant colonel. I'm not retired, so I did not retain the rank. So sometimes when I do interviews or whatever, people ask me ahead of time, how should we refer to you? Or they'll want to refer to me as lieutenant colonel. And, I mean, I don't want to, be weird and, necessarily correct people or whatever and just kind of, make a big deal out of it. But if they ask me, I will tell them, hey, I don't necessarily want to be referred to as lieutenant colonel for two reasons. One, I didn't retain the ranks. I mean, I'm not a lieutenant colonel. I don't have retired, RET after my name. I mean, I don't. Which means I don't want anyone to accuse me of like misattributing to me an accomplishment that I didn't achieve. But also, don't take my resignation away from me. I mean, I had to walk away. I did walk away. I gave up a lot when I walked away. So that means, I didn't retain the rank. So don't take my resignation away from me. So anyway, I was a lieutenant colonel, and I will tell you right now, there's not a single colonel or general in the Army that I would want to work for right now, because I just don't trust any of them. That's just my honest assessment, as of right now. If things get better, then, maybe I'll change my assessment, but that's my assessment right now of the military, of my own service, of whether or not I would recommend military service to anyone else, and kind of how I just feel in general about the status of the Department of Defense. So anyway, probably went a little bit longer than I intended to. I know I was kind of all over the place, but hopefully I at least thoroughly answered some questions that I get typically. And I understand why I get those questions. I mean, they're completely fair questions. I don't have any problem addressing them. I understand why people ask me those questions. America has a lot of pride in its armed forces, and it should. right now, though, with the current leadership, it's not worthy of the accolades and the pride that American citizens feel in it. I mean, it's just not. You know, they feel that pride towards the military, but they should not right now. I mean, they just shouldn't. But I understand why people ask those questions. So anyway, thanks for tuning in to the video. I do appreciate it.